Imagine a world where the Cuvier's dwarf caiman, the scarlet macaw, the red achoy, the zebra canary, the leafcutter ant, and the black tiger prawn existed. Now, I hear you guys are screaming those already exist, but hear me out. Speculative evolution. Y'all know it. This one's a seed world. Seed worlds are seeded worlds. You get it. Meet the grab bird from the future of weird birds. Why would I show this? Well, it's because I needed to show you an animal from the future that was speculatively evolved. Now, to give you an idea, this is the Brinnosuchus, a cousin of the Cuvier's dwarf caiman, one of the species in the project. Here we have the Purosaurus, the largest caiman to ever exist, also a relative of the Cuvier's dwarf caiman. Let's just say evolution can run wild when it needs to.
Okay, I will admit I did a terrible job at explaining this last time, but speculative evolution. Seed worlds are, well, seeded worlds. They have Earth life that has been either moved by aliens or a higher being that we do not understand. Future evolution is just the future of the world, usually missing humans. Alien life is alien life, completely alien worlds. Now, with that out of the way, how on earth does seed worlds and all of that matter when I've stated this one as a seed world?
Well, it is to point out some options that I have in case this seed world project ends before I want it to, and if it doesn't do well, so that my options are open and widespread so that I don't have to completely rely on this project and create more. Now, with the boring stuff out of the way, let's get to the future evolution critters that I've teased. Here we have the river dragon. At 140 pounds, this carnivorous descendant of the Cuvier's dwarf caiman is the apex predator of the riverways for now. It took the get bigger or go home motto as its main source of why it evolved to be this way, as was food growing. Now, here we have the Tera Crocobus imperator, meaning land crocodile emperor. At 160 pounds, this carnivore hunts the large descendants of the red achoy that litter the open forests and mangrove swamps that it loves to hunt in. It is primarily a large carnivore. Now let's go over the land caiman. Caiman specifically adapted to land. This is the red-headed Tera caiman. At 60 pounds, this carnivore hunts the larger descendants of the red achoy, such as the red capybara, which will be shown later in the video. It has its red head as a mating display, similar to its cousin, the wonderfully named teal-headed tree caiman. At an honest 25 pounds, this carnivore, being a descendant of the aforementioned red-headed caiman, is one of the only animals that is known to hunt birds out of their nests that has yet to evolve that isn't a bird itself. It is also related to the silver Tera caiman. At an honest 120 pounds, this carnivore hunts everything it can get its mouth around, from birds to smaller relatives of its, similar to the aforementioned teal-headed tree caiman and the red capybara and other descendants of the red achi. This is a massive carnivore that is definitely dangerous. Now, here we have the emerald-headed caiman. At 200 pounds, it is not a carnivore. Rather, it is adapted to become a herbivore, eating rooty plants, nuts, fruits, bark, and other woody plants that descendants of the red achoy have yet to evolve to eat properly. Now, here we have the Euclops huon, meaning small beast in Greek. The other names have been Latin, but this one is a omnivore, eating everything it can. It specifically likes to eat the eggs of its larger relatives, such as the river dragon, the red-headed Tera caiman, the teal-headed tree caiman, and other species. It is only 10 pounds compared to its relatives. Okay, so now there's another chapter to this already long-ass video. Great. Stick with me here. Meet the red capybara. At 200 pounds, this herbivore eats grasses, fruits that fall from trees, nuts, and other plants that fall from the trees. It is a descendant of the red achi and is currently one of the largest species. Now, it is less aggressive than its brute cousin, the red bruiser. At 120 pounds, this herbivore eats the same things as its cousin, but is smaller due to competition with its cousin. It has a keratinous sheath on its head that is given it its name, the Red Bruiser. It uses its head to hit predators and defeat them. It also has spikes on the end of its tail, which are less useful in combat, but are still used to defend itself. Now we have the ocean Achoy. It eats seaweeds and plants that have grown in extreme abundance, with only the black tiger prawn eating them. It is one of the key factors and actually eats the descendants of the tiger prawn and is rather abundant, with its cousin, the whale Achoy, being its only real competition. But they do eat separate things. As you can see, it says prawnivore. It eats the descendants of prawn that became very krill-like. It is also 3 tons due to this massive diet, being very similar to whales in size and appearance. Meet the buffalo prawn. At an honest 10 pounds, this herbivore is the descendant of the
Black tiger prawn. It is eaten by the ocean Achoy and is actually evolving a more highly developed respiratory system and gets most of its calories from seaweed, but it eats on land as well. Now we have the krill prawn. Eaten by the ocean prawn, it eats macroplankton and microorganisms that live on the planet. It gets its pink color due to not needing to be too defensive due to their main defense strategy being large numbers. Here we have the blue whale prawn. At 300 pounds, this herbivore eats exclusively seaweeds, algae, its smaller cousins, and microbacteria, as well as microorganisms that are very plant-like. It is one of the largest animals to come out of the planet. Meet the blue macaw. At a decent 30 pounds, this omnivorous descendant of the scarlet macaw is a primarily omnivorous animal, primarily eating nuts, some fruits, and other bird eggs, as well as eggs of reptiles, such as the Cuvier's dwarf caiman and other species they are able to get their hands on. And now to the scarlet hummingbird. At an honest 1 pound, this nectivore, the descendant of the scarlet macaw, is the only animal, the only pollinator on the entirety of the planet that spreads the seeds of everything and just spreads pollen and makes sure that plants, reproduce and stuff. Now we have the nutcracker macaw. Completely a seed eater at 25 pounds. It's one of the larger ones. It is one of the smarter ones as well, using tools and its beak to crack open nuts and dropping nuts from higher surfaces when they cannot get their beak to open the seed, which is one of their big threats. Now we have the scarlet mors, meaning death in Latin. At 30 pounds, this descendant of the scarlet macaw is the only fully carnivorous descendant of the parrot. It is also the only one that is fully terrestrial. It hunts crocodilians and Achoy's descendants. Now we have the vulture finch. Due to the excess amount of carcasses left over by the gators and the scarlet macaw's descendants, there are inevitably a species of finch that have evolved to fill in the niche that was left vacant by vultures, hyenas, and other scavenging animals. Now we have the broad-beaked finch. As a nut eater, it eats the tougher nuts that the nutcracker macaw cannot eat. At an honest 12 pounds, it is not very successful in its niche due to there only being around 13 species of nut that the nutcracker macaw cannot eat or open via dropping from a heightened distance. Now we have the clawfinch at 25 pounds. This insectivore is another descendant of the zebra finch, and it is inspired by the mucks of Serena. At an honest 25 pounds, it's very intelligent to some extent. Here we have the worm ant, a detritivore that eats really anything, such as dirt, nutrients, roots. It is only 0.01 ounces. Meet the largest ant to exist so far, The water ant. At 1 pound, this herbivore eats entirely seeds and seaweed. Now we have the Thanos ant, an omnivore that primarily eats leaves, but also eats some meat and other types of food. Welcome to the the seed world of the Cuvier's dwarf caiman and multiple other species. As the last video was on every single group and how they've evolved over the past maybe around 3 million years, this will be on most of them. Now, as this series progresses, I want it to have a lot of, stuff. So, shameless plug time. Go like and subscribe the video. Comment if you can. Get this into the cruel system of the algorithm like you guys did last time.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Okay, shameless plug aside, let's get on with this video, we need to get on with this video. Alright, first off the bend, we have the solar system the planet is located, choosing to name it the Odin system because I can. Now we have the planet's name and its continents. Translated from English to Latin, the planet's name is Crocobus Terra Neo, meaning New Crocodile Earth. Now, if that wasn't boring enough, we have something brand new. Drumroll, please. We have genuses and group names for each individual species of reptile, primarily because I didn't want to do birds or mammals. Well, just mammals. Now, as most of you are bored, and probably are going to click off, stay for just a couple more minutes, because we actually have species. Now, for the ones that watched the last video, this is the hidden tooth caiman, a descendant of the red-headed Tera caiman. Now, that's all you need to know on it. Now, get ready, viewers, because we have some pretty big boys coming up, including the largest crocodilian to ever exist, as of yet. From the last video in the series, we have the river dragon. Watch that video to learn on it, but it is the ancestor of all of these next few species. So up first, we have the short-legged drake. At 3 tons, this carnivorous descendant of the river dragon is a large and rather menacing animal to be feared in the waterways. Now, we have the monstrum maris, meaning monster of the sea in Latin. This 1.9 ton prawnivore is a large, carnivorous, and prawn-eating descendant of the river dragon. It is rather intelligent and rather dangerous, being fully aquatic. Now meet the Neo, or the new, mosasaurs. At 3 tons, this large descendant of the river dragon, not the Cuvier's dwarf caiman, is primarily a carnivore, but will eat some plants such as the seaweeds and barks of roots from mangrove trees. Now, I apologize for how underwhelming those last few species are. However, these next few are going to be some of the largest and the greatest of the reptiles, after the dinosaurs, of course. Now, I will be honest, these next few are rather hilariously named, such as Erectus crocobus, meaning the upright crocodile. It is a 15-pound carnivore, but its descendants will be far larger and far more hilariously named. Well, speak of the devil, we have the Gigantus erectus, meaning upright giant. At 2 tons, this carnivore hunts the largest of mammals and crocodilians yet to evolve and to be shown, but not for long. Now we have the hunter of titans, Crocobus aulus erectus, still meaning crocodile aulus upright. At 2 tons, this carnivorous descendant of Gigantus erectus is a massive carnivore that has to eat at least 300 pounds a week to survive. Now, apologies for the hilariously unserious names of the last few creatures, and apologies for the underwhelming and lack of information. But we have the giants coming up, and after the giants, we have the great and wonderful mammals, and then some very goofy and oversized birds. And after that, we will talk a little bit about some climates, some ecosystems, some ecological niches. I'm just kidding, we'll end the video. We have the emerald-headed caiman. At 200 pounds, this massive herbivorous descendant of the red-headed Tera caiman is the ancestor of all of these next guys. This one, the plant raptor, being smaller than its ancestor at 180 pounds, is a facultative herbivore, meaning it will hunt animals when it can. Here we have the sloth Euclops, meaning lazy beast. At 324 pounds, this herbivore is a rather lazy individual species. Now we have the Crocobus gigantus, meaning the giant crocodile. At 1.5 tons, this is currently one of the largest animals to roam the planet. Here we have the Tera Crocobus. At 6.5 tons, this herbivore is a high browser with a tendency to scavenge. Now yes, the Mokelemembe is named after the cryptid. At 9 tons, this giant herbivore is a high browser without a tendency to scavenge that is the descendant of the Tera Crocobus. Now we have the Giganta planta lacera, translated from Latin meaning giant plant lizard. At 13 tons, this is the largest herbivore to exist, with a very sauropod-like build. Now we have the herd Euclops. At 3 tons, this is a giant, low-browsing herbivore that mostly feeds on bushes and tough woody plants. We have the ant-eating Euclops. At 900 pounds, this guy needs to eat and destroy well over 25 ant colonies a day to survive. Okay, now that we are done with the crocodilians, we can finally get on to the mammals and the last of the dinosaurs, aka the avians, aka birds. Here we have the ocean achoy, being a large descendant of the red achoy. It is the descendant of the dolphin achoy, a large omnivorous distant descendant of the red achoy. It is very much dolphin-like, but lacks the same social structure. Okay, now that we've gotten over the smaller ocean animals, we must get on to the largest of ocean mammals, the achi whales. Meet the whale achoy. At 3 tons, this is the ancestor of the Aquus gigantus achoy, the aquatic giant achoy. At 9.4 tons, it's the largest aquatic animal to evolve as of yet.
Here we have the rat dog. At a good solid weight, this carnivore is the first carnivorous species of achoy to evolve. Meet the striped rat. This gigantic herbivore is an intelligent, social animal. This is the red bruiser. What you need to know is that it is the ancestor of all comes next. Meet the axe-headed achoy. With its rather short posture and its axe-like crest, it is a dangerous animal. Here we have the tall achoy, being the first descendant of the achoy that was non-aquatic to reach a ton. It is a very interesting animal, but not too interesting. Here we have the rhino bruiser, being one of the few achoy descendants that break 3 tons. It is a giant herbivore, and just like its forward-horned bruiser relative, it is a dangerous and somewhat social animal, but it is not as dangerous as the armored rat. At 3.3 tons, this animal is armored and has both the frontal horn and a stegosaur-like tail. Oh boy, we are at the end, well, almost at the end of the video. We have the last section on the descendants of the macaws and the finches, and they're both together because I don't have the energy to make them separate. Just like with the crocodilians, these ones have groups and genuses. Here we have the saber bird. At 120 pounds, this carnivorous descendant of the scarlet moors is
named after a tooth or saber-like protrusion on its beak. Here we have the marine macaw. At 220 pounds, this prawnivore, meaning a prawn eater, is a descendant of the scarlet moors. This is the clawfinch, shown in the last episode. It is the ancestor of the next species, the fernfinch. Meet the fernfinch, a animal that primarily feeds on ferns. At 230 pounds, it is one of the largest birds to ever exist. And lastly, we have the finch of Eden. At 12 pounds, this extravagantly, well, its feathers are rather extravagant. This omnivore, and it is one of the only flying birds to remain that is not in the basket of nearly extinct, due to competition with the descendants of the far more successful scarlet macaw.
Alright, time for some extra content to go with this compilation video. Here we have the saber-toothed badger, a very badger-like descendant of the Ochoi that has a thylacoleo-like mouth, being a carnivore. Now we have the gliding Ochoi at 13 pounds. This omnivorous descendant of the red Ochoi is a glide. It has evolved to glide like a sugar glider. Now we have the Grikos oxythos dorphonos, Greek for fast egg-toothed killer, aka it is a animal that is a carnivore and has an adapted egg tooth to hunt, like a saber of some kind. Now, these next few are very similar in niche, all being large carnivores, with some of them being descendants of, well, all of them being distant relatives of the erect crocobus, with all of them having pretty similar niches, varying sizes, with only one of them being a omnivorous animal. Here we have the peacock-horned caiman, descendant of the herd Ooclops, being a large herd animal. Here we have the silver giganteus titanus, or the silver giant titan, a rather small boar-like animal with a similar niche. Here we have the three-horned caiman, a herbivore descendant of the Titanus crocobus, being a large animal that fells trees to eat its bark. Here we have the purple-winged finch, an omnivorous, colorful animal. Here we have the hyena canary, a more evolved to crunch bone canary. And here we have the Gigantus omniavis, which is, once again, a large predatory. And then here we have various species of ants that I don't care to talk about.